All right, so we are live January the 2nd, 2025. I was planning to go to some art exhibit tonight, but it's way too cold to be walking around. So here we are for the IPS evening deprogram. We're going to continue where we left off yesterday on a couple of things. We've had quite a few examples now of eyewitnesses from the recent fire. And some of the accounts seem to me very questionable. And I would ask if anyone who says that they think it's real, and largely because it's so shocking and they don't want to be insensitive. But if you think it's real, I would ask, on what evidence? What do you have as far as information that we don't? Or are you relying upon what the mainstream has told you? Because that's the primary distinction between auto belief and the skepticism of auto hoaxing these fake events, where we're willing to say, I don't know. I don't know enough to know that it's real. Doesn't mean I'm claiming it's fake, but I certainly can't claim that I was given enough information to know unequivocally that it happened. And we used to be inundated with these types of comments from people with like 2 or 3 degrees separation from the event. Like, oh, I know somebody whose dog walker's aunt's best friend was there. How dare you? We don't get that so much anymore. And I believe it's because we push back. Because this is also a culture war, in addition to being an information war. And what the IPS think tank has done, and the reason why we have somewhat exiled ourselves and quarantined ourselves, is that we have been consistently pushing back at the prevailing trutherville culture and rewiring everything. Like, oh, this framework doesn't work. These definitions, that these words have implied connotations that we can't work with. They have assumptions built into them. So we have been challenging things, challenging the establishment. And the truthers and conspiracy theorists don't think of themselves as the establishment, but they are. It's important to label things appropriately. So you've got the mainstream, which you think of as the establishment, but no, you have the alt establishment or the establishment friendly alternative. They are part of a duopoly and they are triangulated against one another. So, alternative and mainstream opinion both represent the establishment. And so we've pushed back against the establishment and all of their terror propaganda. And now we're kind of at this point where we're engaging in real time media deconstruction, unhampered by any of their bad habits. Like, we don't have to wait for them to finish crying and donating to GoFundMe accounts. No, we just go right into it. Is this fake? What's the wider media context? One of the reasons why I kind of paused as to whether I thought this last series of fires was real is that there were so many of them, which we'll get to, across Europe, the cathedral, then the Alps fire. And we were just talking about the recent release of Fire and Ash, Avatar 2025. I haven't seen it yet, but if we're going to talk about the wider media ecosystem, we have to look at what the mainstream mass entertainment is saying at the time of the PSYOP. So there seems to be a theme here that we will have to explore. What's up, Flozik, Jennifer Lovecraft Reeves, Piano, and Dante? Auto Hoax or GTFO, thank you for joining. We've got a few people already. It looks like about 15 in the main YouTube. We have 2 YouTube channels up. We will be gradually expanding. We're making progress. It's going to take a little bit of time to get back to where we need to be, which will be in an office space, 24-hour live stream, which we have going on right now, but it's just audio. And we want to get the phone systems up and running. Like, if you have an emergency and you want to bring it to our attention, you can call in. And I can put the number up. but I can't guarantee the best audio quality. That's the only side, possibly even Discord. Now, let's just go back. So the Swiss fire victims, 40 killed, 119 injured. 119, I think 113 were identified. So you have the number magic in play. I mean, if they had said, oh, 33 died, I would have been like, oh, it's fake. What's up, J guys? Or J5? Present and accounted for. All right. Now, there was something else, too. We had noted that Guy Fawkes was present at the fire. So when I first heard about this thing, I was told that there was a bartender who had a barmaid on his shoulders, and they're running around with sparklers, and they set the ceiling on fire. That was what I first heard. And so I saw the photo, and it was a man in a Guy Fawkes mask. So Guy Fawkes, at least the mask as we see it, the one we see is from the movie V for Vendetta. Written by Ellen Moore, who was a Aleister Crowley devotee since the age of like 12. So this is significant for a few reasons. V for Vendetta was also one of these movies that predicted a lot of 2020, the lockdowns, etc. And then you have the hacker group Anonymous, who adopted the mask of Guy Fawkes for their activism. And Anonymous was grafted onto Q. So when people say QAnon, well, the QAnons don't call themselves QAnons. They call themselves patriots. They don't like the term QAnon. And I noticed that when people have labels, they kind of get mad if those labels are used, if it's something they know is bad and wrong or crazy. So they hated it. They would say there's Q and there's Anon. There is no QAnon. It's like, no, you're QAnon to me. Because you're Q people, but you're wearing this Anon mask. So the anonymous mask was sort of mal-appropriated by the Magas. It doesn't really belong there. It's this posture thing they do. You know, these activists who want to wear masks, by putting on a mask, it makes it look like they're the underdogs, like they're oppressed. Like, I must wear this because the bad guys might find out who I am. Typical cry bully tactic. I'm not really in favor of people hiding behind masks, but now the reason why this ties into the story, however, is that Guy Fawkes Day is also known as Fireworks Night or Bonfire Night. So Bonfire Night, Fireworks Night takes place on the 5th of November, which relates to the gunpowder plot where Guy Fawkes was arrested while trying to explode the parliament. So bonfires and fireworks. And to celebrate the survival of the king, people lit bonfires around London. And now every November 5th, it's a bunch of people wearing those masks and doing effigies, setting fires. So this year starts off with the burning cathedral, and then you have the mobs of migrant youth. We're talking about throwing fireworks, and this is in France, you know, burning cars, fighting the police, Molotov cocktails. So you have fireworks is a major theme, fires is a theme, this historic cathedral burning, part of the theme here. And then we have the main story, the Swiss resort. So I don't think we can look at these things as disconnected. You know, Berlin burning down, fireworks, like bonfires everywhere. So the Guy Fawkes mask to me just seems kind of like a clue. We also talked about how yesterday tons of New Yorkers were shown an AI video of some kind of firework display that was going to be at the Brooklyn Bridge, where it looked like fireworks were going to be cascading off the side like a waterfall of fire. It looks really cool. I would have gone if I thought that was real. And they show up and they're just standing in the dark like a bunch of fools at midnight, and nothing happens. And this happened in Birmingham 2 years in a row, people placing fake ads. So a bunch of AI videos went out there and fooled a bunch of people. What do you call that? I mean, are they gullible? Well, you could say they're gullible and you could laugh. But if you're still positioned within the world stage fictional universe, you live in a world of fiction and AI, and you're being trolled all the time. The difference is they kind of know it now. They found out. Full wolf supermoon tonight, says Swirling Spice. I love all these creative names with every month. It's like Blood Moon, Worm Moon, Full Wolf Supermoon. And they're always like, this is the closest the moon's ever been to us. They always like hype up the full moons. Kevin Mooring, what's up? Thanks for joining. I think NASA is going to be sending a few astronauts back up there, by the way. I was wondering, like, when are they going to finally do it? And the reason they were delaying it has nothing to do with money or public interest. The reason why they haven't done another crewed lunar landing is because they didn't want to use the old school rear screen projection. They couldn't do a Stanley Kubrick version again because it wouldn't stand up to today's science fiction, to today's video games, to today's quality of content. It would look very bad. And so they had to wait a while in order to get some leverage. And so they're probably going to use the LED screen rooms like the Vegas Dome, the Vegas Sphere. They're going to have some kind of stage for the moon landings and the lunar bases. But yeah, they were just waiting. The special effects was always the limiting factor. Kevin Mooring says, have you heard that J.D. Vance and Erica Kirk are siblings? I did see them side by side, and a lot of people have noticed the eyes. That wouldn't shock me. And there is a lot of drama around this Erica Kirk thing and one of her exes. He's a total Pizzagator. And I don't even believe in Pizzagate. But sometimes people give you a lot of reasons to believe in it. And her ex being best friends with Charlie Kirk, that's strange. And the timeline here is kind of screwy because it's suggesting that their entire marriage was a sham and that the kids are not even theirs, probably borrowed or rented. So, yeah, we will get to that. As far as her and J.D. Vance being siblings, I think the gene pool at the top of the pyramid is pretty shallow, and they're all related, probably. I mean, you saw that Robbie Parker-esque crisis actor at the Charlie Kirk event. How do you explain that? But it turns out that the TP USA executive staff have been discussing a Vance Kirk ticket for 2025. You can actually find the conversation back in October. Now think about that. Back in October, we were talking about Tempest, concurrent programming, and why we expected that Erica Kirk would take over the organization, and she did. Like, we predicted all this stuff based upon our predictive model, including people would accuse the widow of not only faking her grief, which, as you know, has happened, but of being part of the plot to kill her own husband because she was always there to take over the organization. That's the story in Hulu's The Tempest that came out on the day Charlie Kirk was shot. And it features a Charlie Kirk-like guy who gets shot in the neck in the same way, who weirdly has Trump's birthday, if you look at the actor. So we were already talking about this stuff. And then we come across Snake Eyes and Heads of State. And I just watched Heads of State, and it has a Vice President Kirk. And now this is connected because the Vice President Elizabeth Kirk in 2025's Heads of State is behind a plot to take out the president so she can take over. So you have that element. And she gets shot in the neck in the same spot Charlie was shot. So you have that element. And then, and this is the big one, you add in that the actress in Heads of State who plays Vice President Kirk is the same actress who's the blonde femme fatale in Snake Eyes, who was next to Charlie Kirkland when he was shot in the neck while watching the boxing match with Tyler, the executioner. Same actress. In other words, in two movies, 27 years apart, the same actress portrays Erica Kirk in a fictionalized form. That's the significance of it. And we're mapping out world stage characters and their associated fictional counterparts, and it's quite revealing. So, based upon what we had discussed regarding the contemporaneous concurrent programming content out there related to this event, we're like, look, Erica Kirk is going to be vice president. So here we are 3 months later. And yeah, the grifting crew at TPUSA is all in on a JD Vance and Erica Kirk ticket. You've got people like the guy doing the hand signs behind Kirk when he was squibbed. What's his name? The guy who did the books with the book covers that all kind of weirdly foreshadowed the shooting. Frank Turek. Yes. So there you have it. There's going to be some kind of Vance Kirk ticket, and TPUSA insiders have been talking about this for some time. So that's why they brought her out. That was always the plan. Alley Top Files. Let's discuss the Vance Kirk ticket. So this is just something I'm pointing out, that when you look at these various movies that contain the core messaging that's going to go into the PSYOP, it'll have the certain features, common denominators, and we map these out closely with the Charlie Kirk event. How you have the reoccurring character, the Jezebel theme with the female. You have the name, obviously, Kirk, but the neck wound in the very precise place was a reoccurring feature in all of these, plus the name Tyler. You know, Tyler the shooter, Tyler the executioner, Tyler who did the video shoot on September 10th, 13 years before the event, Tyler at TPUSA, who may have betrayed Charlie Kirk by embezzling a bunch of money. Then you have one of Erica Kirk's recently revealed exes named Tyler. So there's this reoccurring theme of the Tyler being the backstabber, the villain. But it's just very consistent. And so to have the same actress where Charlie Kirkland is killed in that one movie show up in another movie as VP Kirk after becoming president by taking out the president, you're like, okay, this all kind of tracks. So based upon this predictive model, what else can we extrapolate from what we have been shown? Well, for one thing, according to the Hulu Tempest series, we are awaiting some kind of nuclear submarine, some kind of Oppenheimering event of a coastal city, I think. So that might be next. But yeah, so we'll continue to dig into the J.D. Vance, Erica Kirk thing. I don't think they're siblings by the way they hugged. I really don't. And I don't think that Erica Kirk is having his baby either. Maybe, I mean, I guess they could be that way at the top of the pyramid, but every normie I know knows everything about Erica Kirk, and they think she's a villain and she's evil. And they get viscerally triggered when they hear that name. Like, how did that happen? Do you remember when she was at the memorial speaking after her WWE entrance, and Stephen Miller says, Erica Kirk is the storm, and everybody cheered? Like she's the storm. And the storm is a code. Like the storm is coming, the calm before the storm, Dylan storm roof, storm the Capitol. It's a big code word in the Q movement for the point where you rise up against the deep state. And they called her the storm. The Tempest is about the widow, who is, again, the Tempest is a storm, who's basically Erica Kirk in a parallel universe where she's from South Korea. And then you have Snake Eyes, where Charlie Kirkland dies. We talked about this one, but it takes place against the backdrop of a storm, Hurricane Jezebel. And then if you recall, days after the event, it was reported that somebody had purchased a curse from the Jezebel witches on Etsy, a curse on Charlie Kirk. So that Jezebel theme saturated the story early on. What's up, P. Trippa? Dinah Southard? Kevin Mooring says Alex Jones is saying Candace is a man and got Erica Kirk pregnant. He is spiraling. No, I do see people in Twitter comments saying that Erica Kirk and Candace are both men. Charlie Kirk's a girl, and they're all in on the trick. I think what's happening here is if you get close to the mark, you're going to start noticing certain patterns. You're going to notice how scripted things are. And so what they have done is they have injected a lot of really bad conspiracy takes into these stories in order to muddy the waters, like all the gematria calculator garbage. Like here I am doing my best to outline and articulate legitimate patterns connecting multiple movies to fake events and the significance of these various characters. And then you have these people on Twitter who are like, well, let's take the release dates of the movies and run it through my Sumerian gematria calculator and see if that number relates to the number of days between, and they just go off in these tangents. And I'm like, okay, I see what they're doing here. They're trying to pepper a lot of schizo word salad takes, a lot of numerology, occultism, and woo into what is otherwise an objective analysis. So we've had to distance ourselves from them. You don't get to the off-world stage without being patted down to make sure you're not bringing in any gematria calculators. We don't allow those here. Leave your gematria calculator at the door. Don't even bring it, or put it in the locker, and you can take it when you leave. But Alex Jones versus Candace Owens, Grifter Wars, does it mean anything? I'm not really sure what it is. They have different audiences. He's convinced that she's there to take all of the women voters who were drooling over RFK Jr. So what Alex Jones has been saying is that MAHA, which is Make America Healthy Again, MAHA with RFK Jr. brought in the woman vote, and that those voters got Trump in. And so Candace Owens is taking those voters with her conspiracies and turning them against TPUSA and against Trump. So he thinks that she's actually a liberal activist doing sabotage. But both of these characters start off with the premise that Charlie Kirk is dead. So the best you can say is, this is kayfabe. It's not like Alex Jones was tricked. It's not like Candace Owens was tricked. When she said that she talked to his ghost, she was making it up. Alex Jones is not allowed to talk about squibs. Yeah, thank you for banning that chemtrail huffer. I'm not trying to judge people. If you have bad taste in drugs, that's on you. But we don't really have room in here on the raft for chemtrail huffers. There's no such thing. You're just scaring people. The sky is not falling. No chicken littling in here. If you're convinced the sky is toxic, the sky is falling, yeah, we're done. My New Year's resolution is we're not debating these people. We're hitting them with 18-inch titanium wrenches. Diana says RFK Jr. is a heroin junkie dumping bears in Central Park, but he's worried about health. Yeah, I'm more concerned about how he walks around in airplanes barefoot and then takes his grandchildren out swimming in sewage. And that's not real. I mean, it's real, but it's part of his character, his persona. Natural immunity. We get our hands dirty. We don't need your government injectables because we're, still in nature. So he's this. It's just this character. It's actually almost parody at this point. What's up, Clockwork 113? Thanks for joining. And then, yeah, he did dump a bear. He found a dead bear, and I think he was going to eat it, but instead he dumped it on a bike trail. And then the truth came out 15 years later. RFK was the Central Park dead bear guy. And didn't he also take a samurai sword to a dead whale, like a dead whale carcass? There's quite a few stories about him. some of it's pretty disconcerting. Pippi Langstruff, thank you for joining. All right, we have a pretty full raft here. I see someone had to motivate Dave J to make room for someone else again. So the New York City mayor, Zohran Mamdani. Now, we talked about him in the context of Dick Cheney dying, everybody invoking 9/11, and then they get this mayor, and to the right wing, not the woke right, but the neocon right, do believe that Muslims are terrorists. Whereas the woke right is actually MAGA ban. They're more or less in agreement with Islam in most ways. But anyway, this New York City mayor is the one who just had himself sworn in a subway. And we talked about the significance of the subway in the World Stage Theater. But he comes out on a video today. I see him on Twitter. And he's like doing his homework or something on the subway, just like some normal guy. 100% staged. But the idea here, and the subway is an interesting space. Because the right wing claims if you go in a subway, you're going to get beat up unless Daniel Penny's there to strangle the homeless guy that's harassing you. And the left wing sees the subway, or in this case, they position themselves in the subway that, it's safe. And symbolically, however, it tends to represent the lower class. And the idea of an uprising would scare the elite. And so there's a lot of subway phobia that was being pumped into right-wing circles for the last few years. I picked up on this leading up to Daniel Penny's asphyxiation of Jordan Neely on the subway. Leading up to it, I said, why is my Twitter feed inundated with subway phobia? Every right-winger in some rural area, people like Tim Pool who live in fortresses, are saying, get out of the cities, get out of the subways. And get out was one of their repeated memes. Well, the movie Get Out by Jordan Peele actually has a lot of relevant predictive content for the killing of Jordan Neely. The character Daniel Penny looks just like the character from the movie. Same character, also with a penchant for strangling, and also does lacrosse. But again, the significance here was the subway. You had the right wing clamoring for a Batman to take care of Gotham, a vigilante. In fact, Marjorie Taylor Greene made that point, that we need a Batman, we need a vigilante. Donald Trump was associated with Batman by the whole Q thing. So the Batman right wing, Joker left wing had been well established. And if you look at the Joker story, like Jordan Neely, the Joker was a mentally ill person who slipped through the cracks. And his story really begins on the subway when he kills the rich guys. And the subtext of the movie is class warfare. And he's a mentally ill person who didn't have any advantages or privileges, fell through the cracks. The newspapers all said, kill the rich. He inspired a gang of lookalikes to put on masks and go after cops, like Luigi Mangione did. Luigi Mangione is another class warfare hero. From the left's point of view, he's a hero. Not a coincidence that Mangione, who is Joker coded, gets thrown into jail, as Daniel Penny, who is associated with Batman, is let out of jail. So the significance of the subway here in the context of PSYOPs is it's the lower class, and it's basically the reason why I think this mayor had to be sworn in there, because he represents the opposite of what these right-wingers wanted. They would rather have a mayor, Daniel Penny. So this person, though, this mayor comes out and he says, quote, we will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism. Now, this is interesting. Of course, one of the dynamics in the Joker movie is that Batman is rich and privileged, and that's why he's got all these great toys, whereas Joker is mentally ill and not getting the help that he needs. And so he's seen as actually a hero because he's one of the oppressed. When he killed the rich guys, he was seen as a hero because he's fighting in a class war. Same thing with Luigi Mangione. Like, well, that's not cool. You murdered some guy, probably with children. But the left wing can't stop clapping like a bunch of seals because to them, this was a victory in the class war. So New York City mayor says we're going to replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism. Now, I don't think he means dumpster fires and looters when he says warmth of collectivism, but you can kind of get the angle here, his positioning, collectivism versus individualism. Individuals who are, capitalists, greedy, are ruining the world. They consistently make, and they've done this since the No Kings protests. The last year, the No Kings protest has all been based on this idea here that we need to get rid of the rich, the individuals, the Elon Musks of the world who contaminate entire systems with their space junk, with their memes. We can't just let anybody take that much power from the collective just because they're rich. So that's one of the things they've been talking about with this this way they frame Elon Musk with the No Kings protests. And remember, after Luigi shoots the CEO, it was like guns out for Elon Musk. Teslas were being attacked. People were scratching Tesla cars. Then you have the Green Beret in a Cybertruck blowing it up outside of Trump Tower. So again, Musk and Trump, who were working together at the time, were both the targets of that event, the symbolic event of destroying a Cybertruck, blowing it up with fireworks in front of a Trump Tower. Also highly significant that the terrorist in that instance was a Green Beret because it calls back to another class warrior, Luigi Mangione, and his association with Luigi, the video game character, which was brought up consistently at the time. In fact, I see people wearing Luigi Green Berets in certain places around here. Luigi's Mansion, and the way Mangione, people are noticing this stuff because Luigi's Mansion is this video game that came out that has to do with a big haunted house. And in it, he has a ghost gun. Well, guess what kind of gun Luigi Mangione used to shoot the CEO? A ghost gun. In Netflix The Madness class warfare show, the CEO who represents Elon Musk gets killed. And he gets killed by one of these Antifa on meth characters who used a ghost gun. Now we're getting somewhere with this. Auto Hoaxer says, wokesters are mad. Cameras caught Luigi so quick, but they couldn't catch the New York serial killer. Right. Interesting point there. And they caught Luigi super quick. They caught him at a McDonald's, which was like 2 days after Donald Trump spent time working at a McDonald's. Probably not a coincidence. I don't think any of it is. And didn't they find a backpack full of Monopoly money, which might have also been a reference to our financial system being rigged or fraudulent? I mean, the whole thing is just encoded with meaning and attached to everything that's being propagated into the media, along with the No Kings protests. And along the same line, you had Mountainhead come out later. This was like earlier this year, but it was after Luigi, where the main character is basically Elon Musk with his friends representing Sam Altman, probably Mark Zuckerberg, and a few other tech bro billionaire types. And in it, the Musk character's generative AI is so good, it's causing riots. It's causing chaos in the world, and he doesn't care. So after this movie comes out, Los Angeles starts burning. There's riots in Los Angeles because of ICE. Then a couple days later, and by the way, a lot of the ICE videos from like the raids and stuff, a lot of those were actually AI that were going viral on Facebook. This was talked about. But immediately after this, you had the No Kings protests, thousands of them. So this No Kings theme has been pretty big. It's all tied into class warfare. We brought up the crown jewels being stolen from the Louvre. While on Netflix in the show Lupin, Marie Antoinette's necklace is stolen. And this is all during another No Kings protest. Again, Marie Antoinette lost her head during the No Kings protest. And so now to get back to where we are with the mayor of New York saying we're going to replace individualism with collectivism, there's something to it here. And it's that movie that just came out, Pluribus. So Pluribus, which is filmed here in New Mexico, it's filmed in Albuquerque. It's an American sci-fi that has to do with the American motto, e pluribus unum. So pluribus means this reference here is create, it's a hive mind. Aliens arrive, extraterrestrials bring a virus, and this thing happens called the joining. And humanity is transformed into a peaceful and content hive mind. So the hive mind is the collective, and it's brought up as this ideal. And the main character, the protagonist, isn't part of it. And the hive mind is trying to reason with her, trying to get her to join them. So I've only seen the first episode, but I could already see where it was going. And now that I hear this mayor talking about let's be collectivists, it's all starting to kind of tie together here. But it's a virus that causes the collectivism, which is kind of interesting if you think about the significance of 2020 and how uniting that was. Whether you wanted it to be or not, it did put us all on the same sheet, gave us the same uniform. Thank you again, Big Hair Tsunami. You got the Dave J. Swatters. Got one for Good Old Fashioned, Into the Break, the Victor, Anufol, Kjo, Sprightly Sprite, Zetetic Mindset, Critter Fest Sanctuary, The Ascending Ancient, Dynamo Hum, have all received blue wrenches. Anonymous says, wait, so if I have a wrench and get gifted a membership, I don't know how your name turns green. You get a green, I think if you become a member for a certain amount of time, you get a little crown or something. I have to look into it. You have an icon of a burning penguin. But the blue wrench is key. If you don't know the history of this channel, this is the 150th or so YouTube channel. We were being consistently banned from 2017 to 2023. And I managed to finally put a stop to it. But it was because of a stalker who was masquerading as me with YouTube's legal team, claimed content controls. He claimed rights over my content, my voice, and would have us shut down regularly. But when this channel started, we were so inundated by trolls who wanted to disrupt the conversations that I decided that I couldn't moderate the chat rooms. We used to have at that point 500 people, 300 people. It was always large numbers. And the chat would move so fast. And it'd be a lot of people who just don't have a clue or are being deliberately disruptive. So what we would do is we would issue out blue wrenches to everybody who had been vetted. So if you're vetted, you get a wrench. And your objective is to maintain peace and tranquility in the chat room, take out anybody who doesn't belong. JS says, please don't talk about the fire in Switzerland. A young woman died from the UK. Yeah, there was also a soccer player who was in there who didn't die. But again, when we had 400 people with the moderator wrench, nobody could get in. Nobody could get a word in. somebody would step in, they would get whacked. And now this sounds bad, but it's actually not, because there was a process. The process was, if you're serious, email me at Infinite Plane Society and say, get me out of the dungeon, give me a wrench. So if you emailed me, I would ask you the question, how many people died at this event? And if your answer was anything other than 0, you would be ignored. But if you said 0, you would get a wrench. And so we started vetting people. So we had an all auto hoaxer audience. And the people who couldn't get in had no voice. And that is what started this whole think tank. It was actually not an echo chamber, but a platform that had standards. We did this before YouTube started making it possible to sell memberships and have members only chats. But we were the first ones to do it. We had members only chats before YouTube did. I think they stole the idea from me. So the blue wrench has always been one of our primary symbols. It's a symbol of order. An armed society is a polite society, and if everybody has this, we can maintain, this sense of decorum. And many people here have been carrying wrenches this entire time on the main channel. People used to send me blue wrenches in the mail. I was thinking about this today. When this channel started, we had a larger following. You can look up the New Yorker article, Looking for Life on Flat Earth. The New Yorker wrote about us. We had the world's greatest daredevil part of our team. We were doing billboards. I had set up a couple of international art shows, all designed to produce memes and content to critique the media and NASA and meet people, and a bunch of musicians were getting involved. Independently published magazines were being produced. We had a lot going on the first year. And then they started shutting us down and eventually kind of shattered what we had. But we've maintained regardless. So if you don't know that much about the history of the IPS, it's been a history of dealing with censorship and then pushing back against it. We had to really persevere through these unfair tactics, and it included me filing multiple lawsuits against YouTube, and it worked. I got YouTube's attorneys on the phone, and we talked about their loophole that allowed third parties to take down YouTube channels just by filing false complaints. They actually fixed that because of us. Igo Dago says, it's the second day of the new year. So much has happened already. Tominoy says, kind of like the New York fire plane the other year. Yeah, we'll get back into the fire thing. I still don't know what the agenda is, but there's some things that have been coming up, and it may have to do with DNA or IDing, because there's a number of people that are having the trouble IDing. Now, there's a lot of videos coming up also showing these teenagers, and these are like teenagers getting drunk, and they're recording the roof on fire. The roof is on fire. So they're recording it, they're laughing at it, they're not taking it seriously, which looks very bad and unusual. And people are kind of riffing off of this. Like, are we that detached from reality that we lost our instinctual dread of fire? JS says, on this one, I totally disagree with you. What do you disagree with me on? I'm saying I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it's fake. But if you know it's real, what is your evidence? What is your special insight? Because as a skeptic, I'm required to suspend judgment until the evidence supports the claims. Meanwhile, the evidence that we're examining, the footage around it, at points seems to maybe go in the other direction. But then again, we're talking about the wider context of fireworks being the theme, the Guy Fawkes mask and fireworks being used, bonfires, the burning cathedral, and then the cities across Europe where gangs are engaging in firework riots with the police. So that you can't say that there's not a lot of fire stuff out there at the same time. So there's this dramatic element to it. That burning cathedral, was it the Vandenkirk? It looked like the Eye of Sauron. So, I mean, you can disagree with me, but what are you disagreeing with? If I haven't said that I know it's real or I know it's fake, what are you disagreeing with? Are you disagreeing with my position of suspending judgment? What exactly are you disagreeing with if I have a non-opinion? Like, I don't agree with your absence of an opinion. Like, I'm suspending judgment. So again, you don't have any basis for disagreeing with me, but I could be justified in disagreeing with you in claiming that you have enough information to know it's real. If what you're going off of is what we are going off of. Another thing too is context. If you're not PSYOP aware, if you're not aware of media fakery, then your opinions are invalid anyway. For the purposes of these discussions, if you don't know you're operating within a fictional universe, if you don't know how much of history itself is a construct and how fake news becomes permanent as fixtures in our fake history, then your opinions don't actually have any clout here. Like, we can just disregard them. So again, I'd be curious to know what you disagree with me on, unless you just disagree with skepticism. If you disagree that we shouldn't rush to judgment, what we do here is we respond. We don't react. And they give you enough information to react, to cry, to get angry, to get emotional. But responding is a little more calculated and informed. Tominoid says Quasimodo predicted it. You mean Quasi-Luminous or Nostradamus? The Nostradamus thing is a great example of the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. The thing that really debunks the numerology calculators. If he really predicted anything, we would know in advance. Oh, on January 1st, 2026, these fires will happen as per Nostradamus. But no, it's always after the fact. They retrofit. The Texas sharpshooter fallacy describes a situation where a guy who's not a really good shot fires all his rounds and then draws the target after the fact when he finds a clump of hits or a clump of bullets close to each other. Then he's able to make it look like he's a sharpshooter. He says fireworks in Berlin, Netherlands, and other parts of Europe were caused by immigrants that caused unrest. Yeah, that's what they were saying. Migrant gangs, immigrants, youth. Yes, that's true. And I'm saying that those are relevant. Those situations are, and all the burning cars and all that fire is very consistent with the overall theme, starting off with the burning cathedral and then the burning ski resort. Started with fireworks, started by a person in a Guy Fawkes mask who is celebrated every year with fireworks and bonfires. So if you don't see the pattern here, you're not paying attention. You have to decompartmentalize and not look at these as isolated and separate incidents, but part of a concerted message. And then also, Plain Decoded says, with all the Cheney stuff, I'm looking at 1-9 or 119. Well, they say 119 were injured. And the Dick Cheney thing, of course, 11/3, very significant date in that story, especially for the architect of 9/11. But that was followed by nonstop 9/11 style psyops and messaging. And that's how this mayor got dragged into the conversation. But the month of November ended with the hotel fires that looked very 9/11-y. The Hong Kong high-rise fires, the burning towers, major theme. So we were looking at a bunch of 9/11-y style events that seem to insinuate that they're bringing back the threat of radical Islam for some event. And then, of course, you had the Bondi Beach, a Hanukkah celebration shot up. And at the same time, the police had stopped a car full of terrorists, and they had canceled a number of New Year's events because of terrorist threats. So they did bring all that stuff back. All right, so let's continue here. Candace Owens killed Charlie Kirk. Janie Say posted this. She must be the prime suspect. She has motive. She's celebrating his death. Now, there is something to this. She did gain a lot from it. And this was posted on New Year's Eve. Hell of a year, beyond grateful to all those who turned this into the #1 podcast globally. Like, what do you think about that? You think Candace Owens did it to boost her podcast? Regardless, the fact that her podcast is #1 globally tells you one thing. The alternative establishment wants you to think someone other than Tyler Robinson killed Charlie. The alt establishment wants you to believe that. She's alternative establishment. The alt media is not anti-establishment. They're not challenging it. They're part of it. So the fact that she's #1 says nothing about the quality of the intel. She does nothing but insinuation. She's disingenuous. She's a gaslighter. And she makes conspiracy theorists look crazy, which is also part of the gig. And I remember talking about this back when she started, how this Charlie Kirk thing had been largely framed as a new JFK. And following the JFK event, probably a squib, it went right into this era of conspiracy theorists. And that's when the term conspiracy theorist was introduced. The people who don't believe the news. And so I think they needed to reboot the notion of mainstream versus the conspiracy theorists, and that they're all crackpots. And so Candace Owens is serving that role. And right now, I don't know where they're at with who did it, but from the very beginning, it was always going to be Netanyahu did it. That's always the case. So the alt media conspiracy theories all go back to the same exact scapegoat, for the same reason that the left wing always has the same scapegoat. It's critical race theory versus critical Israel theory. This is a well-established dialectic. It's structural, and everything will fit that box. And her conspiracy theories are convoluted and boring. And she doesn't have any special insights or sources that we don't have, but she pretends like she does. And she's been trolled multiple times. Seems like she's been trolled. But there's zero accountability. But despite the 33 and counting interpretations of the event, the different whodunits, the different suspects, she has not entertained the idea that he faked his death, that it was completely fake. She can't go there, especially now that she's talked to his ghost. But she's artificially propped up, as they all are. And we were talking about the propping up of Nick Fuentes, along with this looks maxing thing, which is a very bizarre development. And looks maxing did arise out of the incel communities. But it's a typical thing within the manosphere. They have this certain type of an ideal and how you should look this way. And they're really big on techniques to improve jaw lines and hair and all that. And like, what does it have to do with anything? Why is this infertile 19-year-old look smasher who used to smash his cheeks with a hammer to make them thicker or something? What does that have to do with defending America, with America first, with white nationalism and trad wives and MAGA. It seems like a diversion. But I think the reason why is pretty simple. Nick Fuentes was early on the scene. He was probably groomed by Ollie Alexander. So there's this pool of people that were brought in to specifically reach the youth. So Nick Fuentes was always reaching the youth on the right, trying to get the pro-Israel into this anti-Israel stance. So you have the mainstream right and the woke right. So he's reaching the youth. He's on the right. He's reaching the 4chan racists, etc., pandering to them. So he's always been targeting the youth demographic. Well, that's why he and Charlie Kirk were competitors or enemies. Before Kirk was squibbed, Nick Fuentes was always talking about taking him down, taking his audience, beating him, because TPUSA was also reaching the youth, but they were the mainstream pro-Israel side. So between these two, they have significant roles because they're reaching the youth. So they're recruiters, basically. They are the spokespersons for these demographics. So the reason why, just to get the point of my bringing up this Looksmaxter guy, the reason why Nick Fuentes is always around these like TikTok, popular influencers is marketing. It's cross marketing. A Newful says it has to do with the incel or ugly guys that can't. No, the incel guys. Incel means involuntarily celibate, but that's not really the case. They are celibate for the same reason that suicide bombers are celibate. Islamic suicide bombers are essentially engaging in a holy war, and they're attacking the enemy, the great Satan, the West, because it has corrupted their women, and their women are no good. They're feminists. Well, that's the attitude of the groypers, of the far right, of Nick Fuentes. The reason why they want trad wives, the reason why they're incels, is they feel like feminism has ruined American women. That's why all of the right-wing influencers want to get rid of the age of consent. Nick Fuentes has quadrupled down on this point. He's like, if you let them get out of high school and into college before getting them pregnant, they're going to get careers, and you're not going to be able to control them, and they're not going to make you sandwiches. So they're completely anti-feminist, and they feel like American women are therefore unsalvageable unless they return to trad values. And I don't think I've seen any go that route. This is where you get the MAGA ban from. And I watched this emerge. This is not organic. This is completely fake. They have their influencers who all get the same talking points. There was one week where I pointed this out. I said, you have Matt Walsh, Steven Crowder, Nick Fuentes, and Owen Benjamin in the same week. And these guys all hit the same demographics. They're all talking about why they're mad about the age of consent. And they're all married with kids except for Nick Fuentes. So I'm like, why are they all mad about that at the same time? And then I hear them all talking about how mad they are that at the gyms, the women are immodest. Like, oh, they're not covering their hair. They got to wear a hijab to the gym now, a burqa. Like, that's what they're saying. Like, they're wearing these tight yoga pants. Like, okay, I see what they're doing here. They're shaming women for being immodest, for not covering up. So they want gender segregation, men's only gyms, I guess. But I saw all these opinions coming up at the same exact time. And it's very interesting to watch these characters because everything they do is fake and staged. Steven Crowder was revealed by some CCTV to be a kind of controlling over his pregnant wife. And he wouldn't let her use the car because he had to go to the gym with his buddies. So you have the story of Steven Crowder berating his pregnant wife. Meanwhile, he's got all this money, but he doesn't let her have her own car. And he goes to the gym with his buddies. But the point of that story was she wanted a divorce. And he started complaining about how divorces should not be legal. So Steven Crowder was essentially asserting, she's my property, I control her, she's pregnant, she can't drive, and now she's going to get away because the system works against men and their interests. I'm going to the gym with my bros. So you can kind of see how they have created the MAGA ban and MAGA ban values. This also explains why the right wing was very much against Epstein and human trafficking, but they're totally cool with Andrew Tate, who is a human trafficker and a pimp and a woman beater. That guy doesn't stand up for trad values. He doesn't have a bunch of kids and a wife and the white picket fence and all that. No, he's actually pimping out OnlyFans adult entertainers and taking all their money. So how did he become such a prominent figure? He's like the best friend of Candace Owens' husband, buddies with Candace Owens. He idolizes Nick Fuentes, and I'm like, okay, well, this guy is accused of a lot of things, but even if you don't believe any of that stuff, if you look at his values and how he lives, it's completely contradictory to what these guys are espousing to be about. Copaesthetic says, are they going to stone Erica? JS says, Islam Muhammad picked a child at 6. Yeah, that's true. And that's what I'm saying. The woke right type have talked about lowering the age of consent to control women. That's why we call them the MAGA ban. They're basically, the woke right is basically adopting the values of radical Islam. And this is why I said that the incels are like Islamic suicide bombers. You see the connection there? Sexually repressed against Western women. They want to blow themselves up and get their virgins in heaven or something, which sounds like hell to me. 72. The incels are seen as heroes and saints if they take out a bunch of people in this fight. Like Elliot Rogers was a manosphere incel. He was actually the son of the cinematographer for the Hunger Games, which is very interesting. And I think the author of the Hunger Games lived in Sandy Hook, which is also interesting. But Elliot Rogers was one of these internet influenced manosphere types who felt like Western women were evil, and he shot up a bunch of sorority girls, if you recall. Look, Fuentes has openly suggested that women should not be allowed to vote. This is how you know that Candace Owens is fake. How does Candace Owens have woke right values when they would have her? Well, first of all, she's the wrong race. They're white nationalists. They're racists. They have horrible things to say, but they also are anti-feminist. They don't think that women should be doing anything outside of raising their kids. They shouldn't be on social media. Like, she's basically the opposite of what woke right values stand for. So what is she doing being the face of it? Very incongruent. I would also say it's incongruent that Nick Fuentes is this 30-year-old virgin hyping up the ideal of trad wives and lots of kids and white Christian nationalism. JS says, woke, white, right, and Islam followers like oil and water, we don't mix. No, actually, you are the same. They're very similar. The criticism that the woke right has against the West is largely due to what they blame on Israel. Like, Israel controls Hollywood. Israel controls porn. Israel wars control America. Their anti-Israelness is based on what they consider, quote, subversive influence of Jews. And that's what corrupted the women. That's the exact same thing the Taliban says, that the great Satan or the deep state. What's the difference? The deep state was a repackaging of the great Satan. The deep state refers to this foreign influence over American culture, this foreign control. Because of its corrupting influences. It's the same exact thing. Incels are basically suicide bombers. Sexually repressed, want to destroy themselves, fighting against this great Satan, this deep state. Now, by the way, didn't Andrew Tate convert to Islam? Let me double check that. Yes. Yes. Despite being consuming alcohol. I mean, I don't know if he still does. Yeah, Andrew Tate became a Muslim. Now it's performative. But the bigger trend on the woke right is to become Catholic. Igo Dago says, fact is, there is no God or hell. Well, you say the fact is. What do you mean by that? Like, I'm willing to entertain that there is the God of the Bible as described, but I don't believe, if it's true, that that is the entity that created everything. I think, if anything, it's some kind of middle manager. Probably hates us. But if we're talking about religion, we're just talking about opinions. And so my opinion on, quote, God is just as valid as the Pope's, just as valid as yours. And if I say, in my opinion, God is the demiurge, posing as the creator, enslaving souls, despiritualizing us so that we can be recycled, reincarnated in this hell matrix, well, that's a valid religious opinion, because religion is highly subjective. So let's not pretend like there's any facts involved in it. So you say the fact is there is no God. I don't know. And these are pointless things to debate about anyway. We don't need to waste our time debating on settled opinions. Let's focus on the facts. Most people believe that we're soulless apes. And I don't agree with that. I go to the zoo, and I was last time I went, the gorilla. I mean, I think there's definitely something there. I don't think we are soulless, like as in, I don't think we're merely the byproducts of the matter that constitutes our bodies. I saw this AI video of someone doing a tug of war with a gorilla. In real life, it wouldn't work. Last time one of the times I was there, one of the maintenance guys at the zoo was wearing these dark wraparound sunglasses, and he was making some kind of a face at the gorilla, who was just calmly sitting there meditating. And it leapt at him and it growled. I mean, it was so loud, it like vibrated my rib cage. Unfortunately, it couldn't get over the wall and rip that guy's head off. JS says, I'm a white Christian nationalist. I believe in my country. I've noticed, like for other countries that respect their own cultures. Well, the very premise of America first is what? The premise is, oh, America's been putting Israel first. It's always insinuation, innuendo, dog whistle. They're never upfront about it. And you're being a white Christian nationalist. What's your take on Charlie Kirk? Did he fool you? Do you believe that Charlie Kirk was anything more than an actor? Because I noticed the people who follow the white Christian nationalism have zero discernment. Like your religion, your Christianity doesn't give you any insights into fake news, into psychological operations, into seeing through wolves in sheep's clothing and fake people. Like, what's the point of having a religion if it's not going to give you any insights into anything, if it's only going to make you hate everybody else? Kevin Mooring says, what's your take on Trump saying this will be your last Christmas and Alex saying there will be no Christmas in 2026? I have not heard that. I'll have to look into it. Last Christmas. What does that even mean? Now, none of these individuals are credible. Okay, here it is. Here it is. I found your message. Nope. Post me a link. I want to get the exact quote because you're asking me to respond to it. A Newful says, we destroy our soul because we eat meat, dairy, and eggs only by by stopping. So we can't have dairy and have our souls back. Okay. JS says, I'm from the UK. I know little about Kirk, to be honest. Well, they have a Turning Point USA organization in the UK. But anyway, you've had enough time. Are you saying you don't have an opinion? Do you believe that Charlie Kirk was real? Do you think he's dead? We're asking JS, who's a self-professed white Christian nationalist. Like, I appreciate people who will admit the box that they're in. Like, that is your perspective. I can understand your perspective. Perspective is everything. I don't need to know somebody's beliefs. If I know what their POV is, I can tell you what their beliefs are. It's very consistent. You probably are taking regular J pill, regular dosages of the J pill. Do you believe that America's government is controlled by Israel because Epstein recorded a bunch of politicians on video doing bad things? Yeah, so I don't really know about this idea that eating eggs and drinking milk somehow is a mortal sin. I don't know if that's true. Till says, Tim, in your research, would you say that all religion has the same message in just a different language? No, I would not. I mean, it's a nice idea that all religions are just the human beings striving to understand our bigger purpose, and we all call God by the different name. But no, I mean, I ask non-church going Christians, hey, do you have the same God as the Muslims? And they'll say, no, that's a different God. Oh, so now you believe in multiple gods, so you're kind of a polytheist. So they don't agree. No religious people agree. Denominations hate each other. Most Christians online will say that Catholics aren't Christian, that Mormons aren't real Christian. Some will say that Catholics are Satanists. Some will say that Pentecostals are devil worshippers. So no, I don't think there's enough uniformity to say that they all have the same purpose. And I don't believe in any of the religions as having any sort of like spirituality inherent in them. I think what religion does, sort of like media, it's about worldview control, mind control, and programming people to be compatible with the big program. And I think religion is controlled opposition to spirituality. Like, I think if you do have any sort of spiritual insights, the religion is there to make sure you don't get too far with it. To make sure that, like, let's say you have a very active intuition. Maybe you're borderline psychic. Well, religion is there to tell you that, no, that's God speaking to you. And psychiatry is there to tell you, oh, you're mentally ill. I think that we're given certain constraints. Certain constraints are imposed, not just on worldview and the universe of ideas that we can access, but as far as understanding the human mind, I think that's somewhat blinkered. I think a lot of aspects of the mind and how it works have been relegated to paranormal or mental illness instead of understanding what they are with the more scientific frame of mind. I mean, I'm kind of immersed in a lot of Carl Jung, But also, one other point here, I do think, so I'm not an atheist, but I do think that spirituality is something that has to be directly experienced by individuals. You can go to church, and your experience is going to be the result of being around a bunch of people. It's the music, it's the socializing. There's a lot of contrivances in religious ceremonies that are there to foster this sense of belonging to a collective, but I don't think it's the same thing as spirituality. I think it's very manipulative. But I think direct experience is frowned upon. Again, if you have experiences that are outside mainstream psychology, you're ill. You see connections in your life, you're apopheniac, you're schizoid. Or if you have direct experiences and they don't fit the Bible, you'll be told that you're a witch or you got the devil in you. I was describing to somebody certain premonitions I had had, and he said, "Oh, those are fallen angels tricking you." I'm like, "What? Fallen angels? Like, what the hell are we talking about here?" Because I don't think we need to mystify everything we don't understand. I don't think we need to say, "Oh, the universe is talking to me because I keep on seeing this number." Like, oh, it's not the universe, it's your brain. Now, why is it that you're getting these significant coincidences? Why are you noticing these various things? Well, there may be a valid reason for it, and it may be some intra communication between your egoic awareness and the wider awareness that is largely subconscious. But that integration can't happen if we relegate all of the evidences of a wider field of awareness to some mystical source or the unexplained. Jamarian May says churches are based on energy harvesting via the collective. I've done a bit of work, research on this matter, having to do with trying to understand what we're seeing with churches, with religion, with media, and this idea of energetic exchanges. And one of the areas of research that I got into was magic ceremony, group magic ceremony, as it relates to religion. And so if you look at these things as analogous, because I think they are, then you might be right about that. Because the theory behind group magical ritual is that every person there is giving some of their own, quote, energy, their concentration, their focus. There's some kind of like thoughts are things. And if you start with that as a premise, that we are in some kind of cybernetic system, that we're part of the universe. We're not just objects on objects, but that we're actually integrated at the level of the soul, then there may be something there. And the theory behind various magical practices implies that, yeah, there is indeed some thing, some kind of energetic exchange that is being used against us unwittingly anytime you engage in these religious ceremonies. And looking at magical ceremonies, they're no different. The difference is one of them is consciously aware that they're channeling their energy into the outcome of the ceremony, the priest or whatever, and others believe that they're giving it to, quote, God. But what's really the difference here? Structurally, they're the same thing. So I am inclined to think that, yes, your soul is being extracted. But where is it going? That's the question. Where is it going? Well, according to a more Gnostic approach to this, a Gnostic model of the world, you would likely conclude that it is being somehow taking out of you and empowering the system that you're in, that your soul is being converted into some source for the material world, which is actually a soul trap. The world's a vampire, in other words. Continuing here. Somebody used the word louche. Now, the word louche has an interesting origin. I looked into this as well as part of this, but it's a useful term. People today use it to describe the energetic exchange. Like when people are experiencing a psyop, there's this idea that emotional energy is actually being harvested. So in the Gnostic concept of the world is the creation of a false god, or rather a deity, or an entity that identifies itself as God. It identifies as God, and you worship it as such. But it controls the world through its archons. So the archons are essentially the prison wardens of the matrix, and the archons are the ones who are feeding off your energy. JS says religion brings peace for some people and meaning. Yeah, it also brings division. It brings chaos, confusion, illogic. I mean, the bad outweighs the good. Oh, religion brings peace for some people. Like, what kind of argument is that? Like CNN makes, Fox News, these, you're like, oh, well, people feel good knowing what's going on in the world. Well, does it matter if it's all lies? It brings them a sense of peace. I don't think so. I've never met a peaceful religious person. I mean, the people I know who go to church are peaceful because they're socializing. But the people online who are all about their religion are anything but peaceful. They're always in a state of religious war. They're always in a state of holy war against every other religion. They all hate each other. And I'm not exaggerating. So no, I don't think that because it brings peace to some people, like, yeah, okay, I can kind of get that, but that's not a justification for maintaining an institution which traditionally has been used for oppression, for enforcing ignorance. Did you see that painting that was done at Mar-a-Lago? They had some painting of supposedly Jesus, but it looked more like Melania. But it was a blue-eyed Jesus. Yeah, here it is. A $2.75 million painting. It was auctioned off. Trump auctions off a Christ painting made in 10 minutes. So it was a live painting at their New Year's Eve party. A 10-minute painting of Jesus that looks like Melania with a beard and has blue eyes. $2.75 million in 10 minutes. JS says, when you die, your soul is free to go where it wants. That's a nice idea, but I think it depends. I think that if you live, I look at the human being as precariously balanced between these two extremes, our origins and our present disposition. So are you matter or are you soul? We're kind of in the middle. And if you lead your life dominated by your beast aspect, your animal aspect, which is primarily concerned with terrestrial survival, you get one result. And I think if you live with the awareness that your body is a vessel, a vehicle, a temporary one at that, and you live at the level of I'm a transcendent being, I have a soul, there's a higher purpose, you get a different result. One of them is living in the now. The other one is thinking long term, eternity. And in the Gnostic concepts, and there's a few of them, the purpose of this matrix, of this world, of this prison, planet, whatever you want to call it, the whole point of it is to get you to lose your spark, to forget your soul, and to live as an animal. Because then at the end of the road, you die as an animal. You die and you get absorbed into the darkness. If you think back to the image of Anubis weighing the heart against the feather on the scales, at the end of your life, they weigh your heart against the feather. If your heart weighs more than the feather, you get thrown into oblivion. You get recycled. You go into the darkness. You lose your soul. But if the feather weighs more than the heart, it means that you lived correctly and you get immortality. So in the Gnostic concept, Gnostic means knowledge. If you don't attain knowledge of your higher self, you lose. The world wins. The house always wins for most people. This would explain why the churches, which someone had said, that it makes people feel comfortable. Religions make people happy and peaceful. Well, the religions have killed off all the Gnostics. I wonder why that is. Murdered them. You ever heard that expression, kill them all, let God sort them out? Kill them all, let God sort them out. Now, I'm not saying I believe this. I mean, I understand we're talking about history. It's mostly stories. But that has an origin that ties into this. It's attributed to Arnold Amalric, a Cistercian abbot. Okay, here it is. The 1209 massacre against the Cathars. So the Cathars were a Gnostic sect. So kill them all, God will know his own. Justified killing everybody in the city to make sure they got all the Gnostics, rather than allowing the chance that one of them might survive. That doesn't actually make me feel at peace. When people say religions make some people feel peaceful, it's like, I don't know. You should be embarrassed. So I don't agree your soul is free to go where it wants. I think you have to use it or lose it. And another element that I like about this model, this Gnostic concept, is that you've got these three divisions. Like the majority of people are essentially just living for the moment. They're not even aware of a soul or a spirit, and they're fine with that. And even if they're religious, they might not even be legitimately tapped into it. The majority, though, are just going to be recycled, and they're referred to as the helix. The secondary group are those who are on the fence. They could go either way, worldly or return to the celestial, and they are called the psychics. And then the third group are the pneumatics. The pneumatics are already living at the level of soul, recognizing the soul body duality and what's more important, and they're pretty much guaranteed immortality. They figured it out. So you have these three groups. I would argue there's a fourth group. The fourth group, I would say, would consist of those who are not only on the other side, but are antagonistic, as in psychopaths, narcissists, control freaks, soul killing manipulators, soul suckers, all these horrible types of personalities that seem to have no other purpose than to destroy good people. I would say that constitutes a fourth group, because I happen to think there's a bit of a spiritual warfare here. And in this spiritual warfare, it's light versus dark. And religion is on the side of darkness. It's here to help maintain it. The institutions that they have in this world are all here geared towards keeping us in darkness. A Newful says duality is a pretty addictive drug. Yeah, some people will criticize this and they'll say, oh, duality is too simplistic. It can't be good versus evil. And I'm like, that's just relativism. If you can't tell the difference between good and evil, we don't operate in the same universe. And that's fine. You can go be absorbed into the Saturnian matrix for another ride if you want. Restream says that sounds like Islam. Actually, it doesn't. Not even close. I mean, unless you're talking about the religions being institutions of darkness, yes. I mean, the black cube that they all run circles around, the black cube symbolism is prevalent throughout all these movies. Why is that? What's with the black mirror? your iPhone, the black cube television altar in every household. The black cube is the symbol of this realm, the material world, and all the religions worship it. I would say that even, well, every Abrahamic faith, all these religions are all essentially oriented towards Saturn. Not that they quote worship Saturn, but Saturn's boss here. You see this in all the movies, the design authority in Megalopolis, the strangers in Dark City, the agents in the Matrix, the men in black. You have this reoccurring theme of the controllers of this realm, always in black with the black rimmed hats, who control time and space. Well, I can show you that, yeah, indeed, they do control time. We're living according to their timeline, which is completely made up and manufactured and fictional, but we live in it. They control it. But the story is, no, and JS says, why are people in the West scared to talk about Islam? I don't think so. I don't know what you're talking about. The only anti-Islam sentiment you hear from are from the neocon right-wingers. But I don't think that Islam is any different than any other religion. I think they're all equally valid. I mean, they're all equally wrong. They all serve the same purpose, but I mean, they're all the same thing. They're all attempts at people to consolidate worldviews and have some all-encompassing explanation for how things work. But they've been phased out. The new religion, the one world religion that beat all the other religions, is the media. The church of state is mass media. That's why I'm saying the black screen, the black mirror, the monolith, the black cube symbolism, the whole premise here is simply that it's through syncretism. We have the same basic religions, but they've been amalgamated into this one big giant meta religion, which is dressed up with enough science fiction to appear to be based solely in science. So people don't know it is a religion, complete with myths and miracles and martyrs and all that. And, you know, okay, one other point here too. Religion, government, entertainment, politics, these are all part of the same system, which is monolithic. And I look at the holy books as a good example of how this process works. So if you're a Muslim, you have your Quran, and that tells you where we came from, what we're doing, and where things are going. So everything you need to know is contained in this book. And if everybody reads this one book, you all have the same worldview. The problem is you have competing books with their all-encompassing explanations. But these books are worldviews, all consolidated in one place. Well, that's what media has done. Media has replaced worldview formation. It's replaced the holy books for worldview formation. You get your worldview from the news. I call it the News Testament. You got the Old Testament that tells you what came before, and you have your New Testament that comes after and tells you about the future. It's the living book. It's relevant right now. Well, I think we have history for our present worldview that tells us how we got here. And then you have your news, which tells you where you are now and where it's going. So the News Testament is like a new Bible. JS says you need to believe in something. What do you mean? You need to believe in something. Maybe you do. I don't. Who are you to tell me that I need to believe? Yeah, I'm also here to point out that this think tank is non-believers. I think belief is a poor substitute for knowledge. That's why I endorse Gnosticism. You're merely a believer. You only believe what you've been spoon-fed, what was pre-masticated and spit in your mouth by, like how birds feed their babies. Like, you didn't even process it for yourself. You just believe it. Belief is passive. Belief is anti-intellectual, and it's weak and it's lazy. Like, why be a believer when you can know something? You say you need to believe something. No, how about this? You need to know something. Tell us what you know, not what you merely believe. And I say merely believe to be derisive on purpose. He says, so you don't believe in yourself. I know that I exist. Like, belief. Okay, here's the difference. Some people believe in Bigfoot. They have no evidence. Some people know that bears exist because they've seen what they leave in the woods. So you see the qualitative difference between believer and a knower? It's about evidence. I have evidence for my existence. I don't need to believe in myself. I know I exist. You have no evidence for your religious claims. Zero. You have no evidence for most of the stuff you've been told to believe about what's happening in the world and what has happened. No evidence. So mainstream news consumers are believers. This is the key distinction. Mainstream and alternative news consumers are believers. We are not believers here. We're non-believers. We're non-believers because we know more. Additional information leads us to not believe. So I would posit here that informed disbelief is superior to low information belief, to faith-based belief. So no, I don't need to believe something. I don't need faith. I don't need a crutch. I don't need fairy tales to fill in the gaps. No, you're going to argue semantics with me here with these two words. Like, no, you can't use these words interchangeably. It's not productive. Like, we're not here to engage in debates with people who have settled opinions and who think that their beliefs are equal to what we know. Mainstream belief is not equal to off-world stage skepticism. Low information beliefs are not equal to informed disbelief. It's just not equal. They're not even comparable, and they can't be weighed equally. So I just want to make sure that we know this here, that we are definitively non-believers. No religion, no media worldviews are entertained here. And I had to really emphasize the distinction between knowers and believers, because believers are full of themselves. They get self-righteous, they're emotional about their beliefs, and they're very triggered and insecure when it comes to those beliefs being challenged. And too many people have been bullied, kowtowed. Too many people have caved into peer pressure to not call out the believers as being full of it. If you're a believer, it just tells me that you're not a critical thinker and you can be tricked by lies and logical fallacies, and that you don't really need a lot of evidence. So it tells me you're incurious and intellectually lazy, passive and gullible. So when you say, oh, you need to believe, I'm like, no, no thanks. I don't need a lobotomy. Maybe you needed one, but no, I certainly do not. One of the reasons why we set up the Blue Wrench thing at the very beginning is that when this channel started, we were targeted by religious nutcases. Like, oh, well, you're not a Christian. This guy must be a Satanist. It's like, okay, you must be Illuminati. You must be a shill. And I'm like, okay, we got to get rid of the religious people, because they come in here acting like they know something and they don't. They have nothing to add. They just want to run around waving a big flag. I believe something. Like, congratulations. Good for you. Wear your badge, but not here. And to say that you're a Christian nationalist, to me, is kind of a joke. Because this nation that you're a nationalist for is a world stage construct. This is the part that many people are going to have a hard time with if they're still clinging to the world. If you're still clinging to the world deceptions, if you're still that worldly to where you can't see through psyops, then your religion has done nothing for you. And your nationalism is just really good intentions applied towards your own confinement. Because what we're looking at here is the fact that the significant historic events that led us to where we are now have largely been, if not entirely, manufactured. So if we're living on a manufactured timeline, what does that say about the worldview today? If everything is rigged, if elections are rigged, and we have no control or agency here, then how can you be a believer in any part of it? JS says, I'm not a religious nutcase, I just believe. Well, you're a religious nutcase. A religious nutcase, by definition, is somebody who will believe a bunch of kooky, nutty stuff with zero evidence. You believe in a bunch of kooky, nutty stuff, you have no evidence, you are, by definition, a nutcase. And you're religious. Although a lot of religious people will deceptively say, oh, I'm not religious, I just believe. Okay, so now what are you saying? That to be religious is just to be a churchgoer? That you can take the book? No, it doesn't work that way. You can take the book out of the institution, but it still has the same worldview. A Newful says, Tim, this is a warm-up for the clash with the alternative versus the MS. Yeah, you're right. This is a warm-up. We are getting ready to collide the MSM minus perspective with alt media. JS, I am okay with religion because I'm not trying to control anybody. If you're a Scientologist, have at it. Say hi to Xenu. If you're a Mormon, go get your bicycle and ride around the country trying to convert people. Like, I don't care what your religion is. But I'm okay with people being religious because it's none of my business. It doesn't mean that I'm going to pretend like religion isn't malware for the mind, an archaic operating system, a primitive and failed attempt at philosophy, a system of mind control. What's up, King 33? Here is your wrench. He says, you can't offend me. Well, I'm not trying to offend you because I literally don't care about your opinions. But I am, when I'm calling religious people nuts, look, the beginning of wisdom, and this isn't me, I didn't say this, Confucius said it. The beginning of wisdom is the ability to call things by their right names. Unless you're going to make the case that religions do not contain insane injunctions and nutty beliefs, are you going to somehow defend religions as what paragons of rationality? Give me a break. Religions are objectively insane and crazy. He says, let's leave religion. Have you any more subjects? Look, religion is not one of our subjects. You're the one who brought it up. You're like, I'm Mr. Christian nationalist. And I'm like, okay, well, you're a dupe. You're gullible. Good for you. You're still in the box. What are you doing in our think tank here where we foment a culture of informed disbelief and skepticism? This isn't a place for believers. Go to church. Go read your holy book. Go read some biblical miracles or something. I mean, honestly, if that's your worldview, if that's your perspective, that's where you should be. We're here to deconstruct all that madness. And the main focus here is the religion of mass media, which has supplanted and replaced all of the previous operating systems. What we offer here is an upgrade. JS says, should I leave? Nobody cares. But I'm not here to waste time with people who are still in the box. Like, if you're not here to engage in mass media deconstruction, and if you're still part of the political system, you are in the wrong place. We kicked out a chemtrail huffer for the same reason. If you're here to advocate for Christian nationalism, that's as world stage as you can get. You're combining politics and religion. Oh, I've got politics and religion. Okay, well, then you're plugged into a worldview, a consensus perspective on things, which has built in presuppositions that are all resting upon an edifice of lies that we have exposed, deconstructed, and revealed. So you're basically saying, hey, I'm cool with being lied to. I'm in a world of lies. I'm a Truman in the Truman Show, and I'm content with that. That's fine, but we're going to burn the Truman Show down. That's what our objective is here. So like you're not our enemy, but you're on the wrong side of this conversation. You're on the side of religious advocacy, media advocacy, political advocacy. You're defending the institutions of the matrix like it's something to be proud of. A Newful says IPS is a destroyer of God. Well, if the God of the Bible is as described, we aren't friends. Like that would be one of my enemies. The main enemy. Like, yeah, I would be an opponent to that thing. Like I'm kind of, in that sense, I am against everything it represents. Because I think it's a mask for government. I don't think that the gods of the various religions that man has created are anything more than projections, constructs, anthropomorphized, personified constructs that are meant to keep us obedient. I also think that religions have an objective of externalizing any legitimate spiritual experience and attributing it to something outside of you. JS says, I dislike MSM. Right, but you're all for the alternative media. So mainstream media and alternative media are two factions controlled by the establishment. It's not like mainstream's establishment and alternative media is anti-establishment. That's the lie they tell you. It's a duopoly, and I can prove it. We constantly prove it. There's a reason why both sides agree that Charlie Kirk is dead. You're not going to find a platform where people are discussing how the whole thing was a psyop and one of many hundreds of psyops that we have observed over the last 100 years or thousands. I mean, we're just scratching the surface here. JRGMTY says, the people who pray for their sports team to win a game or the country to win a war must be the lowest. Good comment. I always had a problem with that. I had these religious friends. I remember they would be like, oh, I'm going to pray for a snow day tomorrow. Oh, so you can stay home and play Nintendo. Meanwhile, the homeless people are going to have a really bad day. Do you think that your God is going to put your comfort at home in your jammies and your video game and your hot cocoa above the well-being of all these mentally ill drug addicts in the street and let them get snowed on so you can have a day off school, a day off of state babysitting? Like, that's not moral. That's not a good God by any sense. Yeah, I know what you were saying, All Newful. This is the clash between parallel media and alternative. Because, yeah, we are looking at the whole construct, off-world stage versus the world stage. But the world stage is divided into these groups. Like the Gnostics have the division as to how people are in relation to the great deception. Are they just plugged into it? Are they on the fence? Or are they out of it? So we're not trying to reach the people who are plugged in. The only people we are aiming at are the people who have made it into alt media, because at least they went in the right direction before they got stuck in some cul-de-sac. People who call their home teams, we won the game. We won the Super Bowl. So Jamarian May is referencing how they are ridiculous, and they are. It's like, you didn't win the Super Bowl. No, we didn't win. The team won. You sat on your couch eating potato chips. We went to the moon. How dare you say it was fake? No, we didn't. A few people pretended to in a very bad science fiction movie. And this kind of goes back to what we were saying about collectivism and pluribus and the hive mind. And the mayor of New York who's like, we're going to replace this individualism with collectivism. Like, no, I'm not part of a we. Like, oh, we just need to believe something. No, I don't. I'm not a we person. I'm certainly not a collectivist. The various worldviews that I've been talking about, whether it's a crazy religious paradigm or the mainstream paradigm, these are worldviews that are synchronizing people into collectives. They turn you into a we. 2020 was a prime example of this, where we even had the uniforms. And we all looked the same because we're all covering our faces. We're all marching lockstep, 6 feet apart. They collectivize us in many ways with these psyops, where the individual who deviates is the problem. JSS, so who went to the moon? Didn't Muhammad go to the moon on his donkey named Barak? Haven't you heard that one? Let me see if I can pull that up really quick here. Yes, Barak, a handsome-faced, tall, white beast, half mule, half donkey, with wings on the side. And I think he went to the moon. Got to double check that. Got to fact check it. Yeah, look at this. The creature misidentified as a donkey, and the miracle of... Okay, so here we go. It carried Muhammad from Mecca to Jerusalem, ascended into the 7 heavens. And then it says here, splitting of the moon is considered one of the significant miracles performed by the prophet. According to tradition, the Meccan polytheists asked Muhammad for a supernatural sign to prove his prophecy. In response, he split the moon into 2 halves. So yeah, he took his donkey up there. More believable than NASA, says King 33. Critterfest says, this is hands down the best program for learning truth. You've opened my mind. For that, I thank you. Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. You know, what we're doing here is deprogramming. Because if you look at the big picture, the worldview that you have is a product of its history. Well, history in recent years has really just been a collection of, quote, news. History has been consolidated more than ever. You have all these different histories, different worldviews, competing religions, different gods. But over time, they've merged it all together, syncretically blended it into this massive Frankenstein's monster of a paradigm. And it's all based on the program. And what is the program? The program is the script. This is what's going to happen in 2026. This is what's going to happen in 2030. That program exists. The assassination of Charlie Kirk was in the program decades before it happened. The demolition of the Twin Towers was planned decades before it happened. So when I say program, I'm talking about, like in a play, you get a program and it tells you what's going to happen, what scenes, what acts. Well, there is a program where all of these various events are in a sequence. How far into the future do they plan? I don't know. I have some guesses, but decades at a minimum. So looking at it from that perspective, that program, the fake events, is an alternate timeline that is superimposed over the one that we actually experience. So you have 2 timelines, real and fiction. Well, the fiction, which are psyops, simulated events, the fictions are merged with the real timeline. The fictional people, the Charlie Kirks, the Erica Kirk, they are merged like religious myths. So, for example, the story of Muhammad getting on a donkey and splitting the moon in half. Well, that's part of the worldview of people who have accepted that program. So the Holy Book is a program. It tells you where you are, where things are going. It's the entire worldview, especially if it has prophecy, if it's about the future. So my point here is that when you recognize these two timelines, you recognize the fakery, that it's systemic, that it's all on a program, that these aren't sporadic, singular events, PR stunts, force multipliers. No, this is actually systemic fakery, long-term engineering of our history. When you separate the program from the experience we actually have from the real world, well, then what you have is perspective. You have a perspective that allows you to ignore the program, to recognize it and not be in it. So what we're doing here is we're exposing the architecture of the world stage construct and delineating between real and fake and stepping outside of the program. So this is a deprogramming. This is a deprogrammed perspective. We are not part of the program. If you're programmed, then you respond to things, you react to things like they are real. You react. That's emotional control over you. That's mind control. Because the mind control operations aim at your emotions first to override your intellect. We don't engage emotionally. We engage with our intellects, which means we wait, we get more info, and then we respond. A Newful says, we are deprogrammed. What's the next step? Well, it's deprogramming is an ongoing process, as in, well, in a way, once you've come to understand how deep the fakery goes, you're pretty much inoculated. You don't have to pay attention to everything every day. But as far as what's next, what do you do with it? Well, you gang up. You find everybody else who has arrived at this position. Everybody who knows about the long-term scripting, fake news, media fakery, special effects, psyops, those who know about this stuff do not have a platform in the controlled mainstream and alternative media. It's not acknowledged because it's above their pay grade. This is not what the mainstream propagandists are allowed to even touch. This is above their level. You know, squibs weren't even really talked about in these circles until recently. So what we do next is we create that platform. That's what we're doing right now. So the present objective for the IPS think tank is to get everybody who is close to the off-world stage perspective to take that final step. And we will do this by taking the off-world stage and confronting alt media on every one of their orthodoxies, every one of their guardrails and fake conspiracies, all their fake influencers. And as we begin the friction of debate and confrontation, what will happen is the believers will double down and they will adhere to the program. And we want that. We want those who are going to be intransigent believers and clingers to the deceptions to stay where they are. Meanwhile, those who have the sense to see through it will join us. So we got to get the numbers first. That's the next step. Once we've firmly established this third perspective, and that's what we're working on now, we will engage in what I call the Great Deconstruction. The Great Deconstruction is how we proceed with creating this parallel media, this other account. So you've got the mainstream account, which is programmed. You have the alternative, which is just alternative programming. But what about the deprogrammed perspective on every one of these events? So we need 3 columns: main, alt, and off-world stage. And we're going to do a retrospective of the last 100 years of fake events up to the present. And we're going to do this deconstruction where we analyze fake events, why we think they're fake, hoax indicators, relevant, concurrent, and predictive programming, directors and actors involved, and their relation to other similar fake events. Anonymous says, I recently found out a conspiracy theory that pandas aren't real. Yeah, the noise in Trutherville is the reason why we left. One of the reasons why I said we can't even gather among these because they are susceptible to all kinds of misinformation. So the conspiracy theory about pandas not being real brought up a number of interesting points. For one, it brings up the question of fakeability. So yes, it's possible to fake a panda. You can use CGI, you can put on a panda suit, sure. But beyond the question of fakeability is the question of, can this be faked at scale? Could you have this faked across the world over hundreds of years consistently? And the answer to that would be, well, probably not, unless there's a panda faking industrial complex. But to ask the question, are pandas fake, is an appeal to ignorance. Sort of like, what are they spraying? It's an appeal to ignorance. It's asking a question as though something hasn't already been answered. So before you can posit that these things are fake, you have to confront the evidence that they exist. And if your sole frame of reference is a TikTok video telling you that they're fake, and you haven't done any research into pandas, then you're arguing from ignorance. Have you ever been to a zoo? That would be the place to start. The same people also claim that toucans are just parrots with glue-on beaks. Now, the problem with this panda premise thing, and I'd say, test your theories, but it's that they're arguing from ignorance. And they're also lazy, because if they really believed it, let's say you really believe that pandas were fake, that's a big deal, right? Like technically that's a pretty big deal to say that pandas are fake. So that's a major conspiracy theory, and it would shake the foundations of science, biology. All the zoos would freak out. It would really mess with people. But if you're willing to say online pandas aren't real, but you're not going to take that to the bank and prove it, why not? If you're an attention-seeking TikToker and you've come across this notion that pandas don't exist, you would get 1 billion hits if you were to go prove your case. But they shift the burden of proof. So it's an appeal to ignorance, and it's a shifting of the burden of proof. It's also an argument from laziness. Alabama says, the Montreal Zoo, there's only a pigeon and a few bums. Well, here's the thing. You can find skeletons of pandas. You can watch videos of pandas giving birth. So like, if that's a man in a panda suit, that's quite a trick. Because when pandas give birth, the pandas are like, the babies are really small. And I think it goes into a pouch. Like, they gave, the whole thing is really strange. But I would say that before you could say there are no pandas, you would have to debunk all of the panda skeletons, because there are such a thing. Unless you're going to challenge me on that and say there are no panda skeletons, then I'd have to ask, well, where is your evidence to refute the status quo? I mean, oftentimes the status quo is fundamentally wrong or supported by bad evidence or something. But in the case of pandas or any of these supposed animals that don't exist, you can't say it doesn't exist if you don't do your own due diligence. Tim and Vic says, are we talking about pandas? No. Some have said the same thing about gorillas. So what that tells you is this, though. Conspiracy theorists have bad operating systems. They run with conclusions without first analyzing the logical inconsistencies or fallacies that are the basis of their claim. So it's actually interesting to me when people bring these things up, because you can reverse engineer how they arrived at it. And when we bring this up too, it shows you how the people who follow conspiracy theories have a different operating system than we do. The reason why we don't tolerate chemtrail pushers is because they argue from ignorance. Like saying pandas don't exist is like saying contrails don't exist. It's like, well, there's a body of research that supports this. And if you haven't confronted the body of research, you have no business claiming the phenomenon doesn't exist. Good point there. A Newful says the panda stuff, like the robot birds, is stuff they put out to discredit auto hoaxers. Exactly. I can prove that. Laser says here, I bet some alphabet group planted these new conspiracies. That's exactly what they did. So the birds are fake is a movement that came out of Parkland. So after the Parkland High School hoax, the Parkland people were mad that a bunch of conspiracy theorists didn't believe it was real. So they started the birds aren't real conspiracy, where they had vans, birds aren't real. They did protests. They drove around the country, and the media actually covered them. They actually got media coverage. So you see what happened is the people calling the shootings fake are now being ridiculed as, oh, you're the same ones who say that birds aren't real. So it makes you look crazy, and it misrepresents what you're saying. JS says, in your opinion, everything is fake. That would be a straw man. When you say, oh, in your opinion, like, in your opinion, is everything real? So in your opinion, JS, everything on the news is real. You see what I did there? That's a straw man. I'm misrepresenting you in order to discredit you. I would never say everything is fake. A generalization fallacy, not provable. Pandas are obviously real. I mean, here's the thing. A percentage of the news is fake. PSYOPs are not real events. There are simulated events. That doesn't mean that everything on the news is fake. The news is a good liar. Media is a liar. And good liars don't lie with every breath. Good liars are never identified. Good liars are never identified as such because they get away with it. Bad liars lie all the time. You can't trust them. If their lips are moving, they're lying. And so they don't get any power through it. Whereas good liars lie strategically. Good liars lie to people who already trust them. And they do so when they gain some kind of an advantage. So JS says, say something that's not fake, please. Well, why don't you? If you can't tell the difference between real and fake, then you're confused. You see, I'm not confused here. And some people who don't want to exercise intellectual independence will say, well, I don't know if it's real or fake. That's not defensible today. There's enough information to conclusively arrive at either it's real or I don't know because the evidence suggests it's probably not real. But these are conclusions. They're not really ambiguous. Like, I'm in the fog. I don't know. I need a higher authority to tell me what to think. So the JS guy who said, tell me something that's not fake. No, I want you to tell me. Tell me something that you think is real. I want to know what your standards of evidence are. Okay, like for example, the burning cathedral, that's real. right? It's a fire, the thing burned. Now, is the story around it real? I don't know. The World Trade Center buildings came down. That's real. Does it mean that it was a terror attack or direct energy weapons or some other version of that? No. Does it mean that Israel did it to start a war and blame their enemies? No. All we can know for sure is it was a demolition, and the media dressed it up in certain ways. Actually, it's a duopoly, so you had two versions, the mainstream and the truther version. Bondi Beach, every indication there is that was a hoax and a psyop, and we have a list of hoax indicators. But the beach is real. The people who played those roles are real. The guy with the cheesecloth on his head is real. His theatrical blood is real. Erica Kirk's Kleenex is real. There's no tears, but so was she really crying? I'd say that was fake. What I'm doing here is I'm showing you discernment. We're not saying everything's real, everything's fake. No, that's non-thinking. That's reactive. That's reflexive. That's shallow and low information. That's credulity and incredulity. Skepticism is entirely separate from that. So it's on a case-to-case basis, and it's based on reason and logic, not based on beliefs. That's what I mean when I say we're non-believers. So I would like JS, before I start ignoring him, tell me what you think is real. Name one real event and one fake event, if you can. If you can't, then you're confused. And that's kind of an embarrassing thing to admit. Like, I don't know if it was real or fake. I can't tell. I can't make up my mind. So that would be an admission of intellectual impotence, and it would also reveal that the mind war defeated you. If the media mind war and the worldview warfare has rendered you incapable of telling real from fake, then you're fit for an asylum. They've driven you crazy. They've given you the skits. Tim and Vic says, what agency brought down the Trade Center? Good question. I would say the World State Church, the media, the PSYOP entertainment complex. It wasn't another thing to it. It was not a terror attack and nobody died. And if you think somebody died on that day, name them. A Newful says, Tim, what do you think using my normie family as an experiment to see if I can put them into the off-world stage perspective using the June 11th predicting? I would say no. I mean, you can do thought experiments, but I think our time and energy is best directed internally at the people who have already mostly deprogrammed. I mean, I admit I was at an event recently and I had a few drinks and a relative asked me some questions. And they're like, well, what do you think about this? And I was like, well, Trump faked it. It was a magic trick. The media was complicit. And honestly, what I found here is that the anti-Trump people around me agreed with me that it was fake. But it doesn't mean anything. I normally don't even engage in that kind of conjecture because it doesn't mean anything. Because even though they may agree with this one thing, they still think Trump is real. They still think that January 6th was real, that 9/11 was real. So in other words, their perspective is still mainstream. If they think this one thing is fake, it's a very shallow take. It's a low information belief. Because to actually think about it deeply would raise other questions that would undermine the entire world stage. Once you pull that thread, the whole thing comes unraveled. JS says, real event, World War I, World War II. Fake American government has caused so many problems around the world. Busy says, does your family know you have this podcast? Yeah, I tell them not to listen. I tell them not to read my books. I literally say that. I said, please don't read my books. Don't listen to me. And the reason why is that I know their perspectives. And this is something that requires independence of thought. If you're still part of groupthink, like let's say you're a nationalist, well, you're not going to arrive at this. Like that commenter, he's like, he's a nationalist, right? Okay, that's fine. But that's incompatible with a skeptical take on the worldview that has been implemented globally. It's incompatible. To take an objective approach to mass media deconstruction, you have to let go of your allegiances to any of its institutions that are there to build up this false paradigm and maintain the illusion. Yeah, I tell them not to read my books or to listen to me because I just know the information is just not compatible with their operating systems. The 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 Christian nationalist in the room here is MSM plus at best. MSM, mainstream mediation, the dominant point of view, the biggest box. Within that big box, you have subsets. If you lean politically left, you end up in Woketown. If you lean politically right, you end up in Trutherville. These are subsets of the mainstream. He says there's nothing wrong with being a nationalist loving your country. Well, it depends. It kind of depends. Like, what do you mean by that? So, for example, do you support ICE deportations? Do you believe in all of the propaganda about migrants and what they're doing? You know, like military age men, cannibals from Haiti. Because once you go into these categories, you get target marketed with a bunch of propaganda that puts you into these predictable boxes. If you're a Christian nationalist, there's a good chance you're probably anti-vax. And anti-vax is a political position. It's not a anything more than a political opinion designed to put you in antagonism to the opposite side. So this whole system is built upon this bifurcated war wrapped around the political horseshoe. And if you're in that, you're part of the program. So this is what I'm saying here is that you're like, oh, there's nothing wrong with being a patriot and loving your country. Well, from my perspective, there is. If you're an objectivist and you care about truth and you don't want to be plugged into the media matrix, the lies, the false history, the proactive creation of history, if you don't want to go with the program, you have to let these worldly things go. But yeah, if you want to believe in your patriot mythology, go for it. It's like some people are into sports. I have no problem with that. But I will say, from my perspective, you're likely, and I don't want to influence you because this might bring you peace and happiness. But from my perspective, you're a useful stooge in the info war. You're like cool with Big Brother. You're part of the program. Even if you don't think so, if you're in the world stage paradigm, you're part of the establishment. He says, yes, if people enter your country illegally, they should be deported. Mass immigration creates poverty. Yeah, well, this isn't a political channel. And one of the reasons why I think it's interesting that you're here is that I like to engage with people who are part of the world stage so we can show the distinction and where your priorities are different. Your priority is not truth. And it's not just my opinion. I'm going off of facts. The facts of the world stage being a construct made up of a bunch of fake events, myths, and hoaxes mean something. It invalidates your worldview. It literally does that. But what I'm saying here is that you're better off staying in your own box. We are outside of the boxes. We have framework independence. You're confined to a framework that has been fed to you to keep you in this compartment. And I'm not here to decompartmentalize people who are happy with their programming. If you're happy with your programming, then you should stay with the other people and fight for your cause. Go do some activism. Maybe next year go out on New Year's with a fire extinguisher and combat the immigrants with their fireworks. Like, get involved. Join Antifa or Proud Boys. But like, I'm not engaged in that stuff. I'm not part of the info war. I'm not fighting a cause here. To me, the objective to the IPS think tank is separating from the program, and that includes letting go of a lot of the belief systems, and the entire paradigm needs to be questioned. And a lot of what you're saying is likely propaganda anyway. Every time there's an election year, all of a sudden, every right-winger is talking about immigrants and the threat they represent. And then it goes away. Every time. I've observed this long enough to where I recognize, okay, there are certain buzzwords. Like, I had this person call up and she's like, you're telling people not to worry about this stuff and that it's a nothing burger, but the immigrants are all military-aged men. I was like, I keep hearing the phrase military-aged men on every right-wing podcast. So that's designed to make you insecure. You're being invaded, military-aged men, and now you're being threatened, enemies coming through, etc. It's made to put you in a place of fear and insecurity. So your opinion on immigrants just tells me that you're scared and that you're insecure. And you need to gang up with a bunch of people who have the same religion and the same political opinions to defend yourselves against the threat. And it probably makes you feel righteous, like you're fighting a good cause. And to me, it's just like, no, you're in the info war and you're being clowned. You have no power. And that's the other part of it too. You might think you have power and you can vote and the right leaders will save you. I'm saying there's no need to be saved, and that there is no real power that we have here. Politics is largely theater to give us the illusion of control. Lasers Go Pew Pew says, I think only dumb people gather in the streets thinking they're going to change something that way. That's the steam valve. The left loves to go out and march in the streets and scream out their memes. The right just goes on Twitter. They don't even go in the streets. But it's a steam valve. It's a way to blow off steam and make it feel like you made a difference, you did your part, and it diffuses all the tension that they create. So you're being triangulated. You're being triangulated all the time in order to keep you in this constant state of tension. They build it up, and everyone's like, oh, it's going to be World War III. It's going to be a civil war. The world's going to end. And then it just gets released. They go on to the next news cycle. But it's this build up. You give your opinions, you yell about it, you tweet about it, and then you forget about it. That cycle is very cathartic. And I think the catharsis itself is the energetic exchange they seek. So they may not be harvesting your loosh to feed the matrix, but they're certainly tapping into your emotions to get you to expend your energy in a safe way that doesn't threaten the system. So essentially, you're just a matrix battery at this point. Anonymous says the woke right are just as gullible as the woke left. Yeah, well, wokeism in general, it's the same exact process where you get a group to believe that they're being oppressed and the world is secretly run by this group. And they have to wake up the people who don't see it. Woke left believes that, yeah, there's a secret power structure of systemic racism and the West is the devil. And it's going to destroy the world if we don't wake up. And that's why they're so shrill and angry, because everybody's asleep and they got to wake up. The world's on fire. And the woke right is the same thing. We got to wake up to Epstein because Israel controls everything, and you're all a bunch of sleeping goy who are being targeted by subversion. You got to wake up. The woke right is the same as the woke left, different scapegoat. But the architecture of the mind control operation is the same. Plain Decoded says, eliminate income tax, it's evil. Well, if you don't want to pay income tax, don't get a job. Well, who's going to pay for the bread and circuses? Who's going to pay for all these crisis actors? We need your tax dollars. We need you to pay to keep the show going. If that's even true, it could very well be that they don't need that, but that the entire system is designed to just occupy our time and attention with false values. Tim and Vic says, it's 26 degrees in New York, but a ladybug just landed on my bedroom wall. Interesting. Pippi says, just want to mingle, meet and greet. Yeah, a lot of people don't have a very deep interest in this. Like, most people are what I'd call low information believers. They don't have an incentive to be heavily engaged. That's why I tell the people around me not to listen to me. Because if you're a low info believer, then you don't have a lot of investment in it. It doesn't really affect you. You're just going with the flow. As an informed disbeliever, it is very much in my interest to keep up with everything, because we are actively involved in analyzing and deconstructing psyops as they go. But this is kind of niche. See, Maine and Alternative are both passive news consumers. Low information and passive, very shallow. When it comes to media, and you can't say this isn't true, we're the ones who know all the details, the nuance, the names of the crisis actors. We cite our sources. We have a deep dive on every single psyop we confront, as opposed to, I saw the headline, so I believe it. But our form of news consumption is not passive, it's active. There is no active news consumption. There is no skeptical news consumption on the world stage, because it's this bifurcated system where you're only skeptical against the other side. And they're not skeptical about their own side. They agree with or believe in the essential story as reported every single time, even if they disagree on the meaning of it. That's why the entire world stage construct, all the media, all the discourse, operates on the premise that Charlie Kirk actually died. You see what they did? They manufactured a historic event of great significance, and now it's part of our collective history. Plain Dakota says, have you ever heard of the hum? It's a low frequency that everyone can hear if you stop and pause and be still. I've heard of it, but I've never heard it. There are people in this town who've told me that the ground vibrates at certain times because they believe there's some kind of underground system transporting, I guess, I would imagine, like Hyperloop trains from Kirtland Air Force Base to Los Alamos. But whenever I go out into the mountains, I will sit there quietly for a few minutes, eyes closed, and try to identify how many different things I can hear, and try to center myself in space and identify where these different sounds are coming from. And it's quite amazing to realize that most of what we hear, we ignore. And unless you shut your eyes and sit down and consciously pay attention to it all, most of it gets ignored. And that's because you could not have a coherent experience if you didn't filter out most of what you're actually perceiving. And this is where I think intuition comes into the conversation, because if our perception is largely a matter of excluding stuff so we can pay attention, then it means that our center of awareness is largely a filter, but it's not the entirety of what we're actually experiencing. So what comes of all that other information, all this other content that we're absorbing every second that's not being consciously registered? What happens to it? Well, I think that it's not going merely to some landfill in our subconscious and being forgotten, but I think it's being systematically organized with great intelligence, but by an intelligence that doesn't have a center of awareness like an ego, but is just this automated process that is supposed to be integrated so we have a higher level of situational awareness where you do have recourse to this other intel, and if it's relevant, it will come to you through the mechanism of intuition, if not synchronicity. But you would have to be dialed into it. And I think that the model of the mind that we have and this soulless paradigm is designed to keep us from integrating vertically with this other aspect of the mind. It's been relegated to paranormal or woo and has no merit, according to the dominant paradigm. It's excluded. What's up, Dorian? Thank you for joining. Pippi Langstrup says tinnitus. It's nice to get away from computers once in a while and all the fans and the high-pitched whines. I was listening to my recording from New Year's Eve, and I think I identified 5 or 6 different firearms in addition to the fireworks. Again, I think gun owners who fire their rounds into the air on New Year's or 4th of July need to have their Second Amendments revoked. Okay, let's continue here. I do appreciate the fact that we have outsiders occasionally. We have people who are somehow, for some reason, taking the wrong turn at Albuquerque and they end up at the off-world stage. And you know, it's not like we're trying to be exclusive. This is not an echo chamber. But I'm not going to spend my time in a think tank that is completely against everything that I'm about and try to convince them to think my way. Like, I'm not going to go to a mainstream circle and try to spout all kinds of conspiracy theories at them. I think that just creates unnecessary friction. It's a waste of time. And people aren't going to process it right because their point of views are going to exclude it. Similarly, if you're a mainstream advocate, if you're part of mainstream belief, you're just not going to find anything here but debate, which I think is healthy. But believers tend to be emotional and insecure. Jamarian says, do you know anything about bio-digital convergence? I think it's already happened. I mean, it already has for the most part. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I noticed that a lot of technophobia, kind of these neo-Luddites find home on the right. Like, the right wing's afraid of AI. It's afraid of every new development routinely. It's always afraid of this spying and the lack of privacy, etc. But it's like, I don't think we've ever had privacy. Privacy is one of the biggest hoaxes out there. And if they are reading our minds, you think they're going to tell you? And they already do read your minds, if you think about it. If you look at what you've done since you got onto the internet, social media, everything that you shared, all the links, all the comments, it wouldn't be difficult to have a full breakdown of every single person based on their internet history and know them inside and out and be able to predict their entire future based on what you've seen thus far. Like, I think they figured us out. Tim and Vic says, any hot takes on the Swiss fire? Yeah, okay, so the Swiss fire thing fits in with all these other fires, fire and ash, this fire theme. And then you have the police in Hamburg, Germany, all these fireworks. Like, so there's a theme going on. And then I'm told the person that started the fire was carrying a barmaid on his back and she had sparklers. So I'm like, okay, let me take a look. The guy's wearing a Guy Fawkes mask. Guy Fawkes Day is celebrated with fireworks and bonfires. So I'm seeing a lot of that. Then we're looking at the Vondel Church in Amsterdam burning. So there's this general theme all tied up with New Year's. So I'm like, okay, well, what are we seeing here? So the more information I get, the more I find it to seem somewhat questionable. Well, then I'm going through the various witnesses as they come out, and some of them seem a little questionable. So, for example, there was one I was listening to before I came on here, and I'll see if I can find the exact quote. She said something that I thought was kind of scripty. Our Discord's been busy, so there's a lot for me to scroll through. Okay, I believe I found it. And we do have quite a few of these eyewitnesses coming out of the woodworks. None of them are actually shedding tears. Not that that means anything, because everybody grieves differently, right? Isn't that what they told us with Erica Kirk? Some of us grieve with fireworks and political rallies and inappropriately affectionate hugs with the vice president. We all grieve differently. Okay, I think I found it. She was talking about, there was an eyewitness talking about how she saw someone who was holding a cross and the fire wasn't touching him. Did you all see that one? My Discord server is overflowing with posts right now, and I haven't been able to locate my clip of that. But you know, you get these miracles. Here it is. C News. I have a friend who couldn't get out. He held his cross in his hand and the fire dodged him. The fire was all around him, but not on him. So she's describing how he was trapped, but he held up a cross, and then the fire avoided him. Tim and Vic says, interesting, the Jake Paul, Anthony Joshua just took place. Paul and Joshua starred in The Skulls. Paul Walker starred in The Fast and the Furious, a film about fast cars and crashes. Yeah, Tim and Vic says, the Swiss bar was called La Constellation. Right. So there's some clues here that lead me to think there might be something more to it. I need to watch Fire and Ash, Avatar 3, but there's a theme here. Another hoax indicator is it becomes global, international. Everybody sees it. Everybody hears about it. And yeah, sure, this is a major event and it's newsworthy, but I don't know. There's something else here. There's a theme here I'm looking at, the symbolism. So I'm still waiting. The numbers are a little interesting, 119. But as I said before, I don't have enough information to know that it is real, and nor does anybody else that I know of. The Guy Fawkes mask had me kind of looking at it very suspiciously. So I'm going to wait a few days before I come to a conclusion. Jamarian May says, what are your thoughts on Clyde Lewis and his program Ground Zero? I was on some list. It was like the top 50 internet streaming shows, and I saw Clyde Lewis. I'll have to listen to him again. But I would say this. He's MSM Plus. And MSM Plus refers to a subset of mainstream that contains all the conspiracy theories, but they don't have the off-world stage perspective. So we're not going to be in agreement on very much, especially when it comes to UFOs and ufology. I would argue that ufology is not an ology. It's not a rigorous study. It's not a science. It's a superstition at best. But it could be the case that he's just someone who's in an interesting niche. I'm not saying he's an agent or closed-minded. I mean, the ideal would be that somebody with a big platform in alt media recognizes the validity of what we're pointing out, and they join the off-world stage, deconstruct all the conspiracies they used to push, and introduce to their massive audiences this more legitimate framework and operating system when it comes to news media consumption. Tim and Vic says, no reactions to the ceiling being on fire. They keep partying. Yeah, some people have noticed this. And I see some comments like, oh, well, these are just teenagers. Their prefrontal cortex is not developed. They're still children. They don't have adult minds. I'm like, what? I don't know if I buy that. Granted, they're drunk. And I saw one of the interviewees, it was a mother describing how she sent her 16-year-old son to go get drunk up there because it was New Year's. But I could see a bunch of drunk people noticing the ceiling being on fire and recording it. I think I can understand for a moment there, but there just seemed to be a complete lack of survival instinct. What does that mean? Could that be some kind of a filter, CGI? Tim and Vic says, I've been in many clubs and bars. Nobody would react like that to a fire. There's plenty of sober people at the bars. They would be scrambling for the fire extinguishers. Yeah, that was my question. Where are the fire extinguishers? And they said there was only one exit. So I find that to be very suspect as well. And the barmaid on Guy Fawkes' shoulders, who was carrying the sparklers that started the fire, she looked like she was wearing a Squid Games mask. So, yeah, Tim and Vic says it's fake, Tim. Right. Right. Look, as soon as I saw Guy Fawkes, I thought, okay, this has got to be a psyop. It's got to be fake, but what's the bigger agenda? But we're picking up on it. And I think we might have more answers in the coming days. And I'm not quick to say, oh, it's fake, because our take has to come from a place of being highly informed. When Charlie Kirk was squibbed, I said, it looks real. I don't know. And then a couple days later, I'm like, okay, it's all fake. It's just a question of how did they pull this off? So then we're looking at, is it CGI? Is it augmented virtual reality? Is it a squib? And as we go through, we arrive at better and better conclusions. But it's never enough to just say it's fake, close the case, pack it up. we have to unveil it. We have to unravel it, determine what its purpose is, and see what kind of techniques or special effects were employed. He says, I think New Year's Eve is a fake fire ritual and symbolism. Well, New Year's Eve does revolve around the dog star Sirius, which is Greek, but in Egypt it's Sophis, which means scorcher. And the ball drops at midnight. You count down and the ball drops. That represents the peak of the year where Sirius reaches its highest point on New Year's. And then it drops. So again, the brightest star in the night sky, the dog star, or the New Year star, which is also the star that marks the new year on the Egyptian calendar, it reaches its culmination, its highest point, on midnight on New Year's Eve. It is a prominent celestial marker for the welcome of the new year. So given that and its meaning and the scorcher, it has these connotations of fire. And that has to do with this belief that during the dog days of summer, which I believe is July 3rd to August 11th, during the dog days of summer, it's not visible because of its position relative to the rising sun. And so there is this belief that it's behind the sun, it's giving more power to the sun. So there's some mythology around this that we should probably look at. But given the place is called the constellation, New Year's is all about the scorcher, and we have all the fires. Yeah, it does seem very pagan, nature worship, some kind of fire ritual. Violet Pengon said, last year we had a fire start in 1-1. Yeah, last year it was the LA fires, right? You had destructive wildfires across LA to mark the beginning of the year. Deadliest wildfires, Inferno, killed hundreds. And that to me seemed very much staged, controlled demos. You had all the usual hallmarks of fakery. You had, was it John Gutenberg? Is that his name? What's the name of that actor who was, his name starts with a G. He was in I think it's called Lava Lantula. So Lava Lantula is a movie about these Steve Gutenberg, yeah. So Steve Gutenberg, he's like this action hero in Lava Lantula. And in Lava Lantula, these giant fire spewing tarantulas come out of a volcano and they start burning down Los Angeles, and he fights them off. Well, he's the same guy who shows up during the LA fires last year, and he's like, yeah, he's helping the fire department. And the news is all covering it. Yeah, John Gutenberg is helping the fire department. He's moving cars out of the way. And he's like, but I can't move the electric cars. So I'm not quite sure what the agenda there was, but they had a celebrity on the face of it, as though some celebrity action hero can just walk up to a fire truck and help them. And he said that he was going into homes and getting people in wheelchairs and running them down the street. Like, come on. Yes, Steve Gutenberg. So we're at the stage with this one where there's enough info to indicate likely hoax and stage. So then it becomes a question of, well, why are they faking it? And we may have to wait a few days to see the full agenda behind it. But it wasn't just that. Again, it was the cathedral in Amsterdam. It was the immigrant gangs with fireworks attacking the police. It just seems like everywhere we looked, fireworks, fire, Guy Fawkes mask. And then again, Guy Fawkes, they celebrate him with bonfires and fireworks. So there's a consistency there. So the good news is there's a high probability that those 40 people didn't die. that it was a bunch of crisis actors and some kind of a mass casualty simulation, which are often done. But we'll continue to analyze this and other events. Again, you have to look at the broader context, what's happening on the world stage at the time. And I think that there might be some clues in Fire and Ash. I said this yesterday, that when Avatar 2 came out, it's called The Way of Water. And at that time, the story was all about floods. There was flooding going on. The WEF was talking about floods, ocean levels rising. So it was all about floods. And then you had in Atlanta, because the Na'vi, Way of Water, very much like Atlanteans. Atlantis sinks, kind of like the West is going to sink. Atlanta had these riots because the environmentalists, who are like the Na'vi in Avatar, didn't want the police to cut down the 80-acre forest outside of Atlanta to make a training camp. They said, if you cut down these trees, Atlanta's going to flood. So there's a deeper subtext here of the West, its effect on the environment, the need to push back and save the planet because the West is going to destroy it with climate change, that we're like Atlantis, we're going to sink. Like there's all these overlapping stories, but it was water at the time. So now that Avatar Fire and Ash is out, it only makes sense to me that we're having a bunch of fire-related things. Let's see. It says, Avatar. They're facing a new threat from a fiery, aggressive clan called the Ash People. The film centers on external battles and rifts, themes of fire and loss, and the balance of Pandora's environment, pushing the saga into more volatile territory. So again, looking at the wider media ecosystem, inclusive of the biggest movies of the day, what's painting the zeitgeist? Fire's all over it. Psyop Sidecar says, my newest YouTube short compares the Kirk event with the 1775 Liberty Tree Psyop. I'm not familiar with the Liberty Tree Psyop. The British deliberately cut down Boston's iconic Liberty Tree, a symbol of colonial resistance, to demoralize the Patriots by destroying their rallying point. It backfired, and the tree became a symbol of defiance, fueling revolution, not quelling it. It became a propaganda victory for the American cause. That's a very good connection there. Absolutely. The Liberty Tree. Yeah, because the turning point, so they said after Charlie was killed, or Squibb, they said this is the turning point. Jack Posobiec said, 100 years from now, historians are going to look back and say, the sacrifice of Charlie Kirk marks the point where the West fought back and won. And as I mentioned before, Turning Point USA, when it first came out, I said, this has got to be platforming the Turner Diaries, which is Christian nationalism. And the Turner Diaries inspired Timothy McVeigh. It is the story of white nationalists reaching a turning point. So in Turner Diaries, it's about Earl Turner and his diaries. He's the leader of the resistance. He martyrs himself by loading up a plane full of bombs and crashing into the Pentagon. When he dies, they call it the turning point. So the leader of the Christian nationalist revolution martyrs himself, and it becomes the turning point, and then the revolution begins. Charlie Kirk dies, Turning Point USA, and they call it the turning point. And I thought that's right out of the book. And what do you see? A rise of Christian nationalism with 50 plus new chapters of TP USA opening every single day. All right, everyone, appreciate the comments and the channel support. And I want to say thanks to JS. I know we don't agree on anything, and we're not trying to deliberately outgroup you, but we have to illustrate points. We have to demonstrate the architecture of the world stage because it's invisible. So we have to label things, we have to define things, we have to pinpoint people's points of view to accurately have any kind of conversation. But to accurately describe anything, we have to have a pretty good understanding of where we stand. And we have to be unafraid to disagree. It's important to disagree and not walk away saying, well, we agree to disagree. Our beliefs are equally valid, because we're not believers here. So, no, we're not all agreeing to disagree on equal premises. No, in fact, we're disagreeing because you're wrong. We are disagreeing with the mainstream because it's wrong. We're disagreeing with alt media because it's wrong. Factually speaking, objectively speaking. Layla Schmidt says, love always. Energy can be created, not destroyed. The divine spark of God in me acknowledges and blesses the divine spark of God in you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Whenever people think about their various religions and state-created God constructs, I think fundamentally, if there's anything to be taken about any of these systems, it's that we are more than just, flesh and bone and blood, and consciousness is more than just a byproduct of our material essence. And PsyOp Sidecar, if you want to post a link to that video in the chat, I will review it now. I recognize the divine spark in others, but I also recognize the darkness in others. I recognize that many people are pure darkness, that their souls are negative, their souls are evil. And to not acknowledge the basic darkness of this world, the forces that control it, the nature of it, to not describe it is just lacking situational awareness. And it's not even a religious perspective. I think we have to be, well, at least we don't have to be, but I don't think it's simplistic to say that this world is in the grip of this contest between light and dark, good and evil. I think that there is something to it. But I don't think that religion is on the side of good. I think that knowledge is better than ignorance. Knowledge is light, sentience, consciousness is light, ignorance, deception is darkness. And so, from that basic sense, without getting too abstract, I think we can agree that knowledge and light is superior to darkness and ignorance, and we should operate on that premise. So, what we're doing here is we're bringing knowledge and understanding, critical thinking, rationality, and skepticism into a worldview that rests upon the tacit acceptance of a bunch of ignorance and lies. All right, we'll see you all tomorrow for Infinite Plane Saturn Day. The research is ongoing in the Discord server. Appreciate everyone's hard work there. It's been very productive, and it's going to be more so in the coming weeks and months as we move into the Great Deconstruction, which is our next agenda.